There's a place in America where silence isn't peaceful, it's punishment. A place so isolated, so psychologically crushing, that even the most hardened killers beg for transfer to death row. They call it ADX Florence, the supermax of supermaxes. A facility built not to rehabilitate, but to erase you from existence. No contact, no noise, no light that doesn't come from fluorescent tubes. Just you, your thoughts, and the slow realization that freedom was the easy part. But what really happens inside those walls? What happens to the men who enter and never come back out? The truth about ADX Florence will shock you. The fortress of silence, tucked away in the barren plains of Fremont County, Colorado, stands a complex unlike any other. Surrounded by miles of empty land, razor wire, and watchtowers, ADX Florence doesn't need guards with rifles patrolling the perimeter. The landscape itself is part of the prison. Locals call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It's where the federal government sends men too dangerous, too violent, or too unpredictable for any other prison in the country. A living graveyard of names that once dominated headlines. Terrorists, cartel leaders, serial killers, and traitors. Unabomber Ted Kaczynski sentenced to life. Zacharias Moussaoui, the 20th hijacker. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Ramzi Youssef, mastermind behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. All now share the same address. 5880 State Highway 67, Florence, Colorado. But ADX wasn't just built to house evil. It was built to contain chaos. The story begins in the early 1990s. After a series of violent uprisings across U.S. federal prisons, including the infamous 1983 Marion lockdown, the Bureau of Prisons decided something had to change. They needed a place where escape was impossible, where no inmate could harm another, where control was absolute. The result was a design that blended technology, architecture, and psychology into one chilling masterpiece. A prison engineered not to break bones, but to break the mind. Every cell, 7 by 12 feet, concrete bed, concrete desk, concrete stool, a stainless steel sink and toilet, bolted into the wall. The window, for inches wide, angled upward, so you can see the sky, but never the horizon. You don't walk freely. You're shackled every time you move. You don't speak freely, because there's no one to speak to. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. 1 hour in a concrete pit called a recreation yard, surrounded by 20-foot walls and a steel mesh roof. Most describe it as standing inside a giant cage, under sky that doesn't feel real anymore. The architects claimed it was for safety, but psychologists would later call it controlled sensory deprivation, because in ADX Florence, time stops meaning anything. No touch, no color, no human voice, just concrete, steel, and the slow erosion of self. Former inmate Jack Powers described it as a place that buries you alive. He wrote in a letter, "You forget how to talk. You forget how to think. You forget who you are." The system doesn't call it torture. They call it administrative control. But behind every wall, there are stories the public was never meant to hear. Stories of guards who vanished, of prisoners who lost their minds, or something worse, and documents that suggest that inside ADX Florence, punishment sometimes went too far, even for America's most dangerous men. And it all began with the arrival of the first inmate, the man who would learn what hell truly sounds like when it echoes back your own voice. There's a prison in America so secure, even the guards call it the tomb. ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Here, inmates spend 23 hours a day locked alone in a concrete cell, staring at walls that never answer back. The window, for inches wide. You can see the sky, but never the horizon. It's where the world's most dangerous men, terrorists, cartel bosses, serial killers, are buried alive in silence. Some say they hear voices. Others forget how to talk altogether. This isn't rehabilitation. It's erasure. And once you enter ADX Florence, you don't come back the same. If this shocked you, imagine what else they're hiding behind those concrete walls. Hit like, share, and subscribe, because the next story dives even deeper into America's most secret prisons. The Arrival. It begins long before the doors close. The ride to ADX Florence isn't a transfer. It's a funeral procession. Prisoners arrive in heavily armored buses, surrounded by U.S. Marshals, air surveillance, and an unspoken understanding. This is where the road ends. They sit shackled from wrist to ankles, a black box over their chains, eyes darting behind hoods and bulletproof glass. Every bump of the road takes them deeper into nowhere, past mountains, through dead land, until even the sky seems to give up color. Florence, Colorado. Population barely 4,000, but its most infamous resident count, around 400. Every one of them sealed away from the world. When the bus stops, the silence feels heavier than the chains. The gates open not with a creak, but a mechanized hum, because here, every sound is deliberate. Every door, every lock, every echo, designed to remind you that you're not leaving. The first thing they see isn't the building. It's the tower, a single, monolithic watchtower rising from the desert, tinted glass concealing the eyes inside. They call it the Eye of Florence. It sees everything, even what you think it doesn't. Inside, there's no shouting, no chaos, just precision. Guards move in sync, trained to never break protocol, never look too long, never respond to noise. Because here, emotion is weakness and silence is control. The inmate is stripped, searched, scanned, then scanned again. His ID becomes a number, his name a file, his voice irrelevant. He's handed a jumpsuit, thin as paper, shoes without laces, a blanket that smells like bleach. Then he's led down a hallway that doesn't echo, because even the walls are soundproof. They don't want you to hear anyone else. They don't want you to remember that anyone else exists. Cell 13B, 7 feet wide, 12 feet long, one narrow window, angled toward the sky, a sliver of blue that taunts you with what you'll never touch again. Inside that cell, there's no clock, because time doesn't matter anymore. Cameras monitor every movement, the way you eat, sleep, even breathe. The light never fully goes out. Day and night blend into one long gray existence. Some inmates whisper that on your first night, you can feel the prison watching you back. Not the guards, not the cameras, the walls. The new arrival lies on his concrete bed, motionless. He's been in solitary before. He knows isolation, but not like this. Here, even his thoughts sound too loud. Minutes stretch into hours, hours into days. The mind starts to drift, searching for sound, movement, life. And when it finds none, it turns on itself. That's when ADX begins to work. Not as a prison, but as a machine built to break what's left of you from the inside out. Guards call it the program. Inmates call it the process. Psychologists? They call it something else entirely. Slow motion, psychological disintegration. For most men, the first night is the hardest. For some, it's the last night they ever truly sleep. At dawn, the food slot opens with a metallic snap. A plastic tray slides through oatmeal milk, a piece of bread. No words, no faces, just the sound of metal closing again. For the next 1,460 days, this will be his world. A door, a tray, a voice over an intercom that never sounds human. Welcome to ADX Florence. You've arrived, the isolation machine. In ADX Florence, pain isn't physical. It's engineered. Every brick, every hallway, every rule, designed to turn silence into suffering. This is not just a prison. It's a laboratory where the subject is a human mind. The architects call it total control architecture. No inmate sees another's face. Meals are delivered through a slot. Recreation is done alone, in a cage. Even the guards are trained not to speak unless absolutely necessary. The goal? To erase every human connection. Because connection means resistance. And resistance means hope. Most prisons punish the body. ADX Florence punishes existence. The day begins at 6 a.m. The lights flick on automatically, no alarm, no voice. Breakfast arrives in silence. Powdered eggs, oatmeal, milk. There's no taste, no smell, just fuel to keep a body breathing in a space where the soul has nowhere to go. For the next 23 hours, you stay inside. No window view. No sunlight on your skin. No touch, no sound. Just you, your thoughts, and concrete. The walls don't talk. But your mind does. Loudly. Relentlessly. Psychologists call it solitary psychosis. It starts with restlessness. Then pacing. Then hallucinations. You begin to see movement in the corners of your eyes. Hear footsteps that don't exist. And worst of all, you start talking back to yourself. One former guard said, "We didn't need to hit them. The building did that for us." He described men who once ran cartels or commanded terror networks, reduced to whispering to the light fixtures. Some tore their own skin just to feel something real. Others begged for execution, because death, they said, would mean an end to the noise inside their heads. One inmate carved a message into a cell wall with a piece of plastic spoon. It said, "It's not the chains that kill you, it's the silence. The only break from isolation comes once a day, 1 hour in what they call the yard. But it's not a yard. It's a cage. A small, concrete pen with a steel mesh ceiling. No grass, no trees, no horizon. When the door closes behind you, you realize it's not freedom. It's another cell, just bigger." Some men refuse the hour altogether. They'd rather stay in their cell, where at least the silence feels familiar. Over time, the body forgets sunlight, the eyes dull, the skin pales, and the brain starts to unravel. Studies show that after just 30 days of extreme isolation, the human brain begins to change physically. Memory fades. Concentration breaks down. The line between reality and imagination starts to blur. At ADX Florence, some inmates have been in this state for decades. The Bureau of Prisons calls it control. Former staff call it slow death. But those who've lived it call it the box. Because inside ADX Florence, you're not serving time. You're disappearing inside it. I talk to the ants that crawl through my cell. They don't answer, but at least they're alive. Letter intercepted from ADX inmate, 2009. When you're deprived of sound, your mind creates its own. When you're deprived of touch, you start feeling things that aren't there. That's the secret no one wants to admit. ADX Florence doesn't keep America safe. It breaks the men who live there, until safety is all they can beg for. But what happens when the men inside are too dangerous to break? What happens when the mind fights back? That's when the real horror begins, the outbursts, the disappearances, the mysterious suicides that no one can explain. And deep in the restricted wings of ADX, there's a place that guards whisper about, even off duty, a place inmates call the Black Range, where the isolation goes beyond punishment, into something else entirely. This is where the ghosts of Florence begin to whisper, the inmates who shouldn't exist. ADX Florence isn't just a prison. It's a collection of the most dangerous, the most violent, the most notorious men in the world. Men who outside orchestrated terror, manipulated cartels, or ended lives without remorse. And inside, they face a punishment worse than death. Take Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, a genius mathematician who turned rage into terror, mailing bombs to universities and airlines. In ADX, he's not feared anymore. He's invisible. 23 hours a day in a cell. A single hour to step into a cage. No conversation. No contact. His brilliance reduced to the sound of his own breathing echoing against concrete walls. Then there's Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker of 9/11. Outside, he plotted chaos. Inside, he fights his own mind. Anxiety, depression, paranoia, all magnified by relentless isolation. ADX doesn't need to threaten him. The walls do it for him. Some inmates arrived already infamous. Others earned notoriety behind bars. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, spent years in total isolation. His attempts to communicate with the world reduced to letters heavily monitored, a world cut down to paper and ink. Ramzi Youssef, mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, faced a cell designed to erase patterns of thought. ADX Florence doesn't punish with fear. It punishes with erasure. But it's not only terrorists. Cartel leaders, serial killers, even violent gang leaders from across the country, all now share one fate. Invisible, silent. trapped in concrete coffins. A former ADX guard revealed, "You see these men on TV. Think they're monsters? You don't know fear until you see them at their worst alone. The walls get under your skin. Some break faster than they ever did outside. Not all inmates survive the mental strain. Some spiral into depression, psychosis, or violent self-harm. Others disappear without explanation. A suicide here is rarely simple. And rumors circulate of cells where even the guards won't go. Deep in the prison, beyond the restricted wings, lies a section inmates whisper about, the Black Range. Guards don't speak about it publicly. The Bureau of Prisons calls it special housing. Inmates say it's where men who defy the system go, never seen again by the general population. Some return, changed, others vanish. Former prisoners describe it as a place where time doesn't exist, where the mind is stripped bare and reality becomes a fragmented nightmare. It's where the most dangerous men in America are pushed to a point no human was designed to survive. One inmate wrote in a smuggled note, "You think they're just keeping us here, but it's not us they want to control. It's our thoughts, our fear, our memories. They break you so completely that you forget who you were before the walls." This is a true terror of ADX Florence. Not the violence you see on TV, not the crime that put these men here, but the slow, invisible disintegration of a human mind. In the next chapter, we uncover the secrets from inside, letters, confessions, and whispers of corruption and brutality that no visitor ever sees. Because ADX Florence isn't just a prison for men who shouldn't exist. It's a place that hides the things no one is allowed to know. Secrets from inside. ADX Florence is a fortress. Its walls don't just contain men, they hide truths. For the public, the prison is a myth, a fortress of concrete and steel. For those who've been inside, it's a maze of secrets, where the line between law and horror blurs. Letters smuggled out by inmates tell a story the government won't tell. Stories of abuse, of negligence, of hidden punishments, and deaths labeled as natural causes that make little sense. One inmate wrote, "They leave you in a cell with no light, no sound. If you scream, no one comes. If you break, no one cares. And when a man dies quietly, they call it natural." Former guards have corroborated some of these claims. Speaking off the record, fearful of retaliation, one ex-ADX officer described psychological experiments disguised as protocol. It wasn't just isolation. Some inmates were deliberately deprived of sleep, monitored to see how long it would take before hallucinations began. You'd see men talking to walls, pacing endlessly, and management would shrug it off as discipline. Beyond the standard cells, there are sections few outsiders ever see. Units where inmates who defy rules are sent for days, sometimes weeks. The conditions there are deliberately harsher. Lights never turn off. Food arrives sporadically, and cameras monitor the smallest movements. A whistleblower once described it as the punishment of total predictability. You know exactly what will happen next, but you can't control any of it. And then there are the disappearances. Names removed from public records. Deaths labeled ambiguously. Letters hint at ghost wings, where men enter and emerge hollowed silent, or sometimes not all. Guards call it the other side of the box. Inmates whisper about it, as though speaking the name aloud might summon it. Despite the isolation, a hidden network exists. Smuggled notes, coded messages, and contraband sometimes circulate among the walls, a quiet rebellion against the silence. Some letters describe clever ways inmates communicate, using taps, shuffles, and even light reflections to send messages. But these networks are fragile. One mistake, and the punishment is severe. Whistleblowers say the Bureau of Prisons maintains control through fear, a combination of isolation, surveillance, and selective brutality. Every incident is carefully documented, every narrative tightly controlled. And yet, letters keep leaking. They hint at stories the government hopes the public will never read. Some inmates have been deliberately subjected to sensory manipulation, lights flickering at irregular intervals, temperature swings designed to disorient, sounds of metal doors, but no visible cause. These are not isolated cases. They are part of a systemic approach to keep men off balance, to control their minds when their bodies are already trapped. And for every famous inmate whose story reaches the media, dozens remain nameless. Men whose lives, thoughts, and identities are slowly consumed by the silence. The truth about ADX Florence isn't in press releases or official statements. It's in the letters smuggled out, in the whispers of former guards, in the empty stares of men who have disappeared inside the walls. The mind break. ADX Florence doesn't break men with fists or weapons. It breaks them with silence, light, and time itself. Here, the mind is the battlefield, and every day spent inside the walls chips away at who you are. Inmates report strange phenomena, hearing voices that don't exist, feeling insects crawling across skin where none are present, seeing shadows move along walls, taunting them. This is an imagination. It's a symptom of extreme isolation, compounded by the monotony of light, temperature, and sensory deprivation. One former inmate described it as, your mind starts replaying everything, mistakes, crimes, regrets, and then it invents new horrors, things that never happened but feel real. Weeks turn into months, months into years. The mind struggles to differentiate reality from hallucination. Some prisoners scream at walls that aren't there. Some pace endlessly, following invisible patterns. And some stop talking altogether. Psychologists call it solitary psychosis. Symptoms include paranoia, obsessive thoughts, memory loss, and violent self-harm. And at ADX Florence, inmates often experience it all at once. One inmate, after 3 years in total isolation, reported that the fluorescent lights spoke to him. Another began writing messages on the walls, nonsensical, frenzied, but meticulously ordered to maintain sanity. Some hallucinate conversations with long-dead relatives. Others see themselves committing crimes they never did, or reliving crimes they did. In this environment, fear is no longer about what someone might do to you. Fear is about what your own mind will do to you. Some inmates have lost years of memory. They forget their own names, forget the faces of family, forget what freedom even feels like. One smuggled note read, I am a ghost wearing my own skin. I wake up, but I am not awake. I eat, but I do not taste. I exist, but I am not here. And when the mind begins to fracture, the body often follows. Some stop eating. Some injure themselves to feel real. Some simply give up, a quiet surrender to the walls that never sleep. Guards and psychologists alike have observed a pattern. The first weeks bring anger. Months bring despair. Years bring disconnection. Few ever leave their cells unchanged. Few ever leave at all. And this is by design. ADX Florence was never meant to rehabilitate. It was built to contain the uncontrollable. But in the process, it also contains something else, the erasure of self. The men inside may survive physically, but mentally, some are gone long before the world even notices. ADX Florence isn't just a prison. It's a fortress, a machine, and for some, a living nightmare. Behind its walls, men are broken, erased, and forgotten while the world barely notices. If this story shocked you, imagine what else lies hidden in America's most secretive prisons. Hit like if you were stunned. Share this video with someone who can handle the truth. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story will take you even deeper, into the shadows no one dares to show.